We're live.
Hotep.
Greetings. Happy Monday.
Everybody. Happy Monday in the week of Janame and Thanksgiving holiday. Hope everyone is well. We're very excited. It's the family holiday. And we are here. A Coleman House Initiative. Culturally based counseling, coaching, and consulting here today to bring you the art and science of Black love culture. And today we are talking about something we've been looking to get into for several weeks now.
Yeah, but we haven't done it.
Khadijah, what's up, love? What is it?
Colorism.
Colorism.
In relationships.
Doom, 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 doom.
First, we're going to talk about what colorism is.
Right.
And then, of course, we want to know, do you have any preferences? So do you just have a preference for light skin or dark skin or brown skin, something in between?
And how does it play out?
And then where did you get that from? So first, what is colorism?
So colorism is the obsession with different shades of blackness. So basically, in our relationships is playing out as, an affinity to
light
a
skin.
particular color. Well, some people have an affinity to dark skin.
But typically colorism, as a ism, is discriminating against darker skin.
Right.
But I do think that there's a difference in relationships with men and women.
Definitely.
So black men and black women.
Definitely.
So we're going to talk about that. But go ahead with your Is that
So
the
I
end of your definition?
So I wanted to. As always, I like to start with the spiritual, cultural, and then make my way all the way down to the practical everyday. So I think that definitely colorism. So when we talk about blackness, so to understand colorism, peace, Tom Berry, what's up, brother? To understand colorism, we have to understand what blackness is. And for as ironic as it can sound, I think it's one of the greatest challenges that we see in amongst people on earth, especially melanated people. What is blackness? What is it? First of all, so I like the definition that Dr. Khalid had, and I added one to it. It simply is black is color, culture, consciousness, and a corresponding cosmic connection of creativity. So I added the of creativity because I've grown to learn that it is the creative gene or the creative energy that is what we recognize blackness as on the most practical level, right? So we create dances, we create words, we create languages, we create trends, and we really drive the social energy of the world. But when you say cosmic color, culture, consciousness, and a corresponding cosmic connection, I know that some of us are, antithetical to the word black. I don't want to be dogmatic on that. You can say whatever word you want to say, but they all mean black. So my name, Mancho, means black. Kali, we is so Maurice, so many other words that we know that transmit that essence that means color, culture, consciousness, and a corresponding cosmic connection of creativity. So that is what we're going to rest on as what the definition is. And so colorism is how we've been affected by white supremacy. And I want to say this. I want Nawasha to talk about, I don't know if you have that definition.
I don't actually.
Here. But while I'm talking, hopefully you can find it real quickly. That Francis Cress Welsing has. But what I see is something that's really interesting. So much people talking about, racism, white supremacy. I even hear it on the news, right? I never thought I would hear so much of it, but people don't really define it. And so I wanted to help people or to give a definition that we could really all agree on, because we're using this term a lot, and sometimes it annoys me that we're using this term and we don't really, nobody's defining it. And I find that to be very interesting. Control the verbal narrative. We talk about something, but we can't really define what it is, so we all don't have a clear understanding. But colorism in our relationships, how is it playing out? So I want to ask you, anybody that's out there, has this been an issue for you personally? And let's talk about some of your personal experiences around colorism. If you the dark chocolate, like Moncho, or if you the vanilla chocolate, or the light bright, the red bone, whatever terminology that people use to describe our brothers and sisters who are lighter skinned, if you've had an experience. We're going to get into some very practical stuff that we deal with, like hair and all these other things that are a part of colorism as it relates to Black love. So anybody out there, as Nawasha looks for this definition,
which I think I found it.
Let me hear from you. What's your position? What's your experience with colorism? So you found a definition?
I believe so. So my favorite definition of racism is from Francis Cress Welsing. So I'm just going to read it because I really should memorize it, but I don't have it memorized. So racism, or white supremacy, is the local and global power system and dynamic structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth, a planet upon which the vast majority of people are classified as non-white, black, brown, red, and yellow by white-skinned people, and all of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white-skinned people. So that definition is amazing.
So what does that mean?
There's so many commas in that.
Kareem Anwar, what's up, brother?
But I love this definition of racism because it is extremely thorough, right? So that was extremely thorough. But the idea of patterns of perception, so we were just talking about perception. What is perception really? What is consciousness? So that's in what Marshall just talked about when you're talking about what blackness is. But what is consciousness actually? Right. How we are perceiving things is really through our 7 senses. So when you say that there are patterns of perception, I think that really comes into play with colorism, right? Because we talked about it. People make reference to it a lot, right? Because I think because I'm lighter than Moncho, right, or my hair is different from his. Right. So I think that people sometimes make reference to it, right? And it hasn't been an issue in our relationship, right? So, I don't think we've ever.
Prior to people talking about it, I don't think we've ever even had a conversation about it.
We didn't. We actually didn't.
In 17 years. Believe it or not, black people, we have never even really had the conversation.
And I don't think that looking at who Moncho has dated and been in committed relationships with, right, that you would see that there's some type of pattern where everyone looks like me. Right. Or people that I've been with where everyone looks like Moncho. So I think that people do have their preference, and we want to know if you have a preference because we really want to talk about where that comes from. So even though we haven't talked about it, other people have talked about it and say, hey, have you ever noticed, or
let me
does
tell
anybody
you this story.
Ever say?
Let me tell you this story, right? We had interaction with a colleague, right, in a professional setting, right? This like blew my mind. This was in 2016, right? I think this was in 2016. Musai, what's up, bro? And the person said to me, so I saw the person's name, their last name. So they're in the Mercer County area, and I saw the last name, and I said, oh, do you know this person? And I said, oh, you have this last name. Do you know this person with the same last name? She was like, oh, yeah, that's my family members. Oh, I was like, so are you related to XYZ with that last name? She said, yeah. I said, oh. She said, yeah, that's my cousin. I said, I used to have the biggest crush on your cousin. Like, we really liked each other, but we never hooked up, right? So it just so happens, and she out there, she might be watching tonight. It just so happens that her cousin is a light-skinned woman, right? I don't know if she's as light as you, but she's definitely lighter than me. And so she was like, oh yeah, I was like, so yeah, me and your cousin, we was big on each other, man. We liked each other a lot, but we just never got together, never hooked up. We expressed it to one another, but we was never able to synchronize our lives and really hook up. And so she said, oh yeah, so you just got a type. Because I'm looking at your wife and I'm looking, I know what my cousin looked like. And I'm like, that was the first time anybody ever said anything like that to me. And I was like, I didn't even respond because of what we were caught up in, but it sunk in later. And I thought about it and I was like, dag, what I really see is that people project their issues around colorism. Because I've dated many, many women. My first love, I don't want to
many women.
I've dealt with a lot of women. I've loved a few women, right?
That's the
and
asterisk.
All of them have been caramel to really dark brown. A couple of them have been light. But I do have a preference, and it's a naturalista, what I call a naturalista. She's just, whether she's, midnight chocolate or whether she's really light, she has a natural energy. And I won't trip off of exactly what that means, hair, makeup, whatever, but it's just a natural energy about her, a natural beauty, whether she wears makeup or not. So that's my only style. Other than that, the shade, is not that important to me. But I just thought, for that woman to say, you have a type, and she had only known me for a few minutes, I was like, damn, like, you know what I mean? I didn't even,
But I do think
I thought that was interesting.
People do have a type, and it could be for different reasons. So that's
Right.
what we want to talk about today,
Right.
is some of the reasons. So first of all, we kind of laid a foundation with what is racism and talking about all of the areas of people activity.
Oh,
You
Goddess
sometimes
Karen
know, we hear about things like the doll test, or, my grandmother definitely told me about the paper bag test when she was younger. Like, they really would, say, are you, lighter than the paper bag? You can come in. If you're darker than the paper bag, you can't. But like, where do we get those things from? So I definitely remember when I was younger watching cartoons and recognizing that there was racism in cartoons. So the cartoons that I watched in the 80s, I would ask my mom, why is this in the cartoon? Why, when somebody blows up, do they go into blackface in a Warner Brothers cartoon? And my mom would say, this is racism. This is supposed to be like a black person. And I was really, they were older cartoons, but what I realized is that really has never stopped. It's not
Right.
so blatant, I would say, but we were just talking about a couple of cartoon movies.
Modern day cartoons, right.
That are fairly recent in the last 20 years, where you can see on television and in movies catered to children that darkness is evil.
So I made a good point.
And
right.
Whiteness, the closer you are to white, is more beautiful and more pure and more desired.
Right.
So by the time we are dating, sometimes you have a preference or you have a heart calling, and we talk about that all the time, because you're following your heart if you're looking for your soulmate.
Right.
But sometimes
Right.
your preference is not you following your heart, it's a pre-programmed type of preference.
Right. And
So
go ahead. I was going to say, especially for men, but
and I think it is. I think it is
Yeah.
different for black men, because just in looking at colorism, I've read a couple of different studies that talked about black women, so lighter skinned black women in comparison to darker skinned black women. So, some of the things that really stood out for me, and I want to say, what was the name of them? It might have been like the color paradox is one of the studies that might be from the early 2000s. And I can't think of what the name of the other one is, but it talked about the fact that dark skinned women are more likely to get the death penalty, And to just like men, we know that the incarceration rate is based on skin color. Right. But even in blackness,
so I'm getting locked up for that thing we did in New York, and you not.
Even
though you did it,
blackness, the shade that you are, you have a greater chance of having a harsher sentence.
Right.
Even when it comes to, we recognize that you are black, but it's now just the blacker that you look to us deserves more punishment. But another one that I thought was really interesting, so this is black women being incarcerated for longer amounts of time. And then the idea that even the marriage rate is different for light-skinned women and dark-skinned women.
Now that's interesting. That's interesting.
It depends on who does a study and who they actually interview and who they poll. So every time I read something about a study, I know it's limited. Right. But I thought that the conversation, even amongst a group of people who are supposed to be just a sample, it was about a 15% difference. That if you were lighter skinned, you had a better chance of being married. So I think that's really interesting for women. I found that those things are interesting. But for choosing a man, I know that most women that I know, black women, say that they prefer dark-skinned men. And I think, my mom is my complexion, and my dad is dark-skinned. So my mom actually told me when I was younger,
Lacey,
that she chose a dark-skinned man because she did not want light-skinned children, because she had a hard time being called high yellow, red bone, all these other types of names. And she was like, I don't want that for my children. I'm going with the blackest man that I can find. And she said, I have a preference for dark skin. Right. So now we just happen to come out, me and my sister came out looking just like my mom. Right. And my brother's like a shade darker, but not close to my dad's dark skin. So I think that when I was younger, my mom told me all of those expressions, the darker the berry, and my dad was dark skinned. I never really even thought about having a preference. But I will say, when looking at what makes popular impressions, so movies, music, and things like that, I would definitely note more darker brown to dark skinned men are found attractive by black women. So now that's black women's magazines, black women's blogs, and that's, maybe in the last 20 years.
Yeah, that's in the last 20 years, because prior to that, we was El DeBarged out, Princed out. We were...
But 20 years is a long time. It hasn't changed for women. Like, if you really think about who's on top as a woman right now, like, you're going to name somebody like Beyonce, Rihanna. Right. Like, if you're really thinking who is the top black actress, they're typically brown to light skin. Right. Versus,
Denzel.
Idris.
Shout out. Let me just tell you, Wesley Snipes, wherever you at, my brother, you single-handedly, bro, you single-handedly, Lacey said Christopher Williams, you single-handedly ushered in the non-return to dark-skinned men. The non-return. It was a long time before we started to embrace so many of the beautiful light-skinned brothers that's out there that's doing their thing. There's many of them on the scene today. I know, what's that one brother that was in that corny movie that we saw with him and Sanaa Lathan and my man.
Something with E.
Michael Ealy. Yes. Yes. He was in there with Ricky.
But I don't think he is that light skinned.
Yeah, he's light. He's light compared to he was in it with Morris Chestnut, and you know what I'm saying. But
I'm saying the
Wesley Snipes,
real like Christopher Williams, like you have wavy hair and you have
Michael Ealy is like that. He got like blue eyes or something like that. He's like that. And what's his name? Diana Ross's son, Evan. And it's a couple. Is he what?
Sex symbol or a
to somebody? He's a child to
so.
us, but yeah,
I don't think so.
Everybody is looked at as a certain the way Hollywood promotes their imagery. Everybody who comes out is some kind of sex symbol. You're
Well,
just
what I'm
made
saying
that.
is when I see, well, it could just be again, could just be in the circle
Musai
that
said
I'm
we
with.
are all melanated people. That's a good point. We're going
And
to talk about that
it could
because
just be,
that's the reality. And well, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I think it depends on what you're looking at. I'm not even saying that I would necessarily say, Rihanna or Beyonce are my favorite singers
Oh, no.
or performers by any means.
No.
But what I'm saying is, like right now, if the last 20 years had an impression on me, then this 20 years is having an impression on the people who are coming up now. So like
Right.
when you say you have a preference at the time that it's time to date,
Right.
you're already deep in. You're deep
Right.
into the system.
Right. So the conditioning always happens as a child. As you said, if we look at the Lion King, Scar is a little darker than Mufasa. If we look at any cartoon, rarely, I've never seen, I won't even say rarely, I've never seen, an example of the antagonist being light and the protagonist being dark. I've never seen that ever in my life on Earth. I've never seen that. 40
And those
years.
are the subconscious
Right.
perceptions coming out when you're writing something, when you're drawing something, when you're
Right.
scripting something, and even when you make the decision, because it's starting when you're very young, like we said, when we're sitting in front of cartoons and we're making the decision, who do we want to identify with? And then the proof of that is that you can do the doll test every 20 years and
Right.
it
They
comes
just
out
did
the
it.
same.
I saw, what's his name from CNN? What's the guy's name? What's the name, son?
Anderson Cooper?
Yeah, Anderson Cooper did the doll test again recently, and it was worse.
But
Actually,
even not even the doll test. But what I thought was really interesting about these two studies was it showed that even adults, when shown two photographs, and it talked about who would you vote for,
Right.
so things that were really supposed to be based on character, like we're talking about relationships should be based. Who would you vote for? It's going to be the person who looks most white. And that was for white people, but also for black people. So even black people looking at two photos saying, you're going to vote for senator, who are you going to choose? It's another like about 20% that is going towards someone who is lighter skinned, or who has certain phenotypes. So this categorized people who were on the news. So from, weather,
Right.
to sports, to what you want to look at
Right.
is something that is closer and closer and closer, especially where we are,
Little Bill.
to the phenotype of whiteness.
Right.
Or what we're saying is the
Matlock, what's
phenotype
up?
of whiteness.
I see, in the relationships, in the coveting and the lusting for women that we all do as men, and it's a healthy thing when it's done in context, lusting is. But, again, what's fed to us is the lighter skin, different haired person, whatever that is, from black people. Now, I like what Bob Okwesi said, and I miss Bob Okwesi that came around our way this weekend. But Ashra Kwesi always says that there's no phenotype that defines an African characteristic. So we have the thinnest nose, the thinnest lips. We have straight hair. The Nubians on the continent, they look like they got perms like Barry White. People, a lot of people didn't realize that Barry White never permed his hair. That was his hair. Now, James Brown and some other people, they actually were perming their hair, but Barry White, that was his hair. So, we see straight hair, kinky hair, we see curly hair, we see thin noses, big lips, prognathous jaw, and a non-prognathous jaw in the African phenotype. So there is no one characteristic that defines blackness. And especially if you travel around the world, you will begin to see that black people look like all kind of stuff. We talk about here, we talk about a particular nose structure, we talk about a particular lips, but even that, all of the phenotypic things come second to shade, because in the system of racism, white supremacy, white is right And the closer you get to whiteness, the better off you are in a society under their system. So now Neely Fuller, who is a cohort or the mentor, if you will, of Frances Cress Welsing, who wrote this book, one of the, I think that ISIS Papers is one of the top 10 books that you have to read in your life. This book, you have to read this book if you intend to understand race in the world. You have to read that book. If you don't read that book, you really don't understand what racism is and why it exists. You don't understand. I know when I'm talking to a person who has read that book, and I know when I'm talking to a person who has not read that book, because you don't have a context for what even racism is. And like I said before, a lot of people talking about it on the news and stuff. I hear white people talking about taking down white supremacy. And I'm like, really? That's interesting, because white supremacy is what has you in a position to say that we taking down white supremacy. So that's a really interesting thing. But
it's a popular conversation.
But it's a popular conversation. But like so many things, the trick is, let's talk about it, but let's only go surface deep. So we're talking about something that we never define. Nobody that you hear on TV saying the word white supremacy defines thoroughly what it is. And that definition that Frances Cress has, that Nawasha read, is it. But in our relationships,
it's global. So because of that definition, you can go to Asia, you can go to Mexico, you can go to Brazil, definitely. And what you'll see is that people are buying skin bleaching creams. So, that's a big industry. It was originally an industry for women, again, because the fair-skinned woman is really what's being sought after for marriage and those types of things. But now even men are using bleaching cream. So people are going to risk, mercury poisoning and a lot of other things. And, a lot of times we're talking about relationships in the United States, of course, but many things are, you can compare to Black people in the diaspora. So that is Canada, Mexico, Brazil, that's the Americas. Definitely the islands. And Europe and Asia and Australia. So everywhere you go, there is this idea of colorism because of the definition that we were reading. That's why I think it's the most thorough, because it really talks about what it is, how it's happening, and why it's happening all in one definition.
Right.
But we still didn't I didn't notice if anybody said they have a preference for light skin or dark skin, and if they ever thought about where it comes from. Sometimes you might just get the preference from your first love.
Right.
And then that sets the barometer.
My first love was blue-black. She looked like this right here. She was black. Ifatunde, what's up, brother? Much love to you. What was your first love? What do you look like?
My first love, the first person I ever had a crush on, I would say was like white Latino. So he was Cuban, but was not as dark as me. That was the person that I thought, this person is great, and I, thought about. That was probably like maybe junior high, freshman in high school. But the first person that I ever really loved, that I thought I was going to marry, was brown skin. And I just thought, this person is gorgeous and beautiful. And, they still are not dark skinned like my dad, but I just thought that I was just amazed by the way that they looked. But I never, in my mind, I know women who have said, I only date lighter skinned men that have a certain kind of hair. I'm going for the mixed kids blog or the IG account. But I also know women who are saying I'm only into dark skinned men. And I think that it's interesting to know where your preference comes from, because we always talk about doing your strategy for a soulmate. Really getting a strategy for where your complement is. But a lot of times people are giving superficial criteria.
Right.
So when you're really talking about a complement to your personality, yes, there is a color wheel and there's compliments.
Right.
And you can say yellow and purple are on the opposite spectrums of the color wheel. But that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about people. And I think that having you're limiting yourself, saying that your choice is out of a certain phenotype.
Oh, Melanie Renee said, I'll jump out there. I prefer dark-skinned men, but have no, what does that say?
Have not limited, I think.
Have not limited my variety of melanated counterparts. Okay. That's
and I
peace.
think there is something that you just find attractive.
Yeah, that's peace. I think that, what I find and what I have found, and I really found this once we got together because of the work that we do, and, so many people approach me. And never before, until I was with Nawasha, I had so many men say to me that I want that kind of light-skinned woman like you got. And, I think that sometimes because of so many of the stigmas, there is people who have a light skin preference, if that's what you have. They're never like I thought that was dope that Melanie said that, but I rarely hear the person jump out in the public forum and say, I prefer light skinned people. I just never hear that.
I think it's easier to take. I prefer dark-skinned people.
I think that is, more. Even though for some of us we actually do have a preference. Some people say I don't have a preference. Now I find that interesting. I definitely have a preference for natural-looking women, and I have been attracted to them when they are darker than me, all the way down to lighter than Nawasha. But that natural energy where, I don't limit it to one particular thing, but I know it when I see it. It is just a non-manufactured beauty. It is just you're promoting the natural way that you are, and it is manifested. When we first met, that's what I was saying to you. When I have been attracted to women, when we saw the sister this past weekend that we know, and we saw her out, we both had commented to each other about how naturally beautiful she was, right? Remember the sister that was selling What's Her Face's mom?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and she is like this jacket. She's black. Gorgeous. Black. But she, not just that she's black, because I see a lot of dark-skinned women that don't have a natural look. They have a very manufactured look, and I'm not attracted to that. So I definitely have a preference, but it's not a skin tone.
Yeah, I think I have a preference for height.
Okay.
Even though I have dated people who are my height and a little bit shorter. So I'm 5'10", and just being, I think, self-conscious about that. I was self-conscious when I was younger because I've been 5'10" since I was in the 7th grade or so.
Right.
I've been 5'8" in the 7th grade, 5'10" by the 8th, 9th grade.
Right.
So my preference has been to be with someone who is my height or taller.
Right.
But I have gone out with people who have dated. Actually, that my first love that I was talking about was shorter than me.
Yeah, you look shorter. You look shorter, B. But we still love you, though.
That was definitely I wanted to have that preference. I'm 5'10", I want to be able to wear heels, and I don't want to be self-conscious. But I know many women who are my height and taller who date men that are shorter than them with no problem. So I think that, again, some of the preferences are coming from almost you're not comfortable, or I want to say almost like a character flaw. So if I'm saying, hey, there's a great man, but he's
said, wow, you 5'10"? Yeah, we giants, man. When we be meeting y'all in person, we've yet to meet someone our height. Is anybody in our Facebook friendship our height? I'm 6'3", so Nawasha's 6 feet easily. She's saying 5'10", but she's really 6 feet. So, we just big when you see us, when you meet us in person. But what's that there?
Yeah, I think that this is really interesting too. What are the derogatory terms that are used when it comes to skin tone? Because we're kind of talking about family last week, and we're talking about it a little bit this week, and we're going to keep talking about it because it's the holiday season. But when your family gets together, is there like, a preference? So sometimes you can see that siblings with the same parents come out with different skin tones, and it's talked about in the family. So you as a person, like whether it's your friend group, which I definitely heard things at school about people who were darker skin and lighter skin, people who, even Latinos, because my father is dark skinned, but he's from Puerto Rico.
He's Moreno.
Latinos have this like hierarchy with hair. So like you can go from, you have an afro to you have straight hair, and then even if you have darker skin but straight hair, there's like a hierarchy for the preference of that particular phenotype.
Hierarchy that leans toward racism, white supremacy. And we see it. Nawasha has a term that we say, if you've ever seen us present anywhere, we often start off and say, Ethiopian Kundalini says,
somebody gave their height.
Is that a man, or are you a man or a woman?
Man.
Oh, okay. Oh, that don't count, bro. You 5'10". Good, but that's good though. That's good for you to be tall, taller. But I think that we are seeing this across the globe. So especially in the Latino community, Nawasha has this saying that she says, everybody wants to be black, but nobody wants to be black, especially black people. And what does that mean? Everybody wants to be black when it comes to pop culture, Jay-Z, Beyonce, whatever, hip hop, whatever trend is popping. Everybody wants to demonstrate their blackness, but or their affinity or love for it. But nobody wants to be black when it comes to spirituality, culture, or the political essence of being black. And most especially black people who are most victimized by racism, white supremacy. So everybody wants to be black, but nobody want to be black, especially black people.
But that's the superficial again. Like, it's cool.
Right.
It's, it's great to be black, even for white people. Like, white people will say, I'm just the white guy, I don't want to be white. Right. Like when it comes to,
they say that to me a lot.
What's accepted in a social exchange, because there's
they make fun of the whiteness
on, we know that whiteness
until it comes time for the political whiteness
is causing conflict.
Right.
So I think that no one really wants to align with that, but I see it all the time, and I know I have said this on a live. I see it all the time because of how I work, that Latinos who are darker than me will not check that they're black on applications. And so I work in a college setting, they're going to put race and ethnicity. A lot of times Latinos put, I'm Latino, I'm Hispanic of some kind, depending on what the application says, but we'll skip over the race in order to just go to the ethnicity. And I think that is, is speaking to racism and colorism, because you're, like I said, you're darker than me. So I would definitely consider myself a black woman. But even when I explain, as another person who has a parent from the Caribbean, from the islands, who speaks Spanish, you are still a black person. So you're either white or you're not. You're either black or you're not. So when you're classifying yourself, I think it's interesting that we want to still lean towards whiteness when it's time for applications, and it's time, like Masha said, for the politics of it all or the finances of it all. But when it is, they also, I noticed a lot of my younger students don't want to put white. So there's this, I don't want to align with whiteness, but I don't want to really put myself in the category of blackness. So you have this unspoken selection criteria when it comes to a lot of things, but it's really affecting your relationship, especially if you have children and you pass those derogatory things on to your children, or you just don't notice. We say self-reflection in our house for dolls and toys and books and the types of things that our daughters use. But if you just don't notice what's on the movie, that really subtle change in this character is bad and evil, so they have to be a shade darker, even if they are not real. So even if they are not people, even if they are not human per se on the cartoon, they still have to come out that shade or two darker in order to be bad.
Let me back up and just say culturally around the world, we see this in the Latino culture. It makes me sick with the, I don't really see it from Haitians, but some people that's from Jamaica, I see it. That the double consciousness of W.E.B. Du Bois, that's right, Ifatunde. I see it where so many black people from the islands want to identify with their nationality as a race. So if it would be the equivalent of me going around saying I'm an American, which I would never say, but unless I need to use it for something. But because the fact that you come from an island is not your race, and I think that it's absurd that we have so many people, so many black people that identify with nationality. And I personally see it the most coming from the islands. So I see it from the Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, running like hell from being black, and we know you black. And then I see it in the, Jamaica, where people are saying, I'm not black, I'm Jamaican. It's absurd. But we see it in India, who has some of the blackest human beings on earth. They make me look like Nawasha's complexion, how dark they are. And they are quick to say, Mnet Black, Mnet Black. They want to tell you all day how they're not black, when we know that India has the largest group of black people outside of the African continent, and then Brazil being after that, and then America being after that. But what you see in terms of the media and a lot of the people you see in the 7-Elevens and whatever Dunkin' Donuts that they have really capitalized on here, they range from your complexion down. But we know that you're black people. So you've taken a political position because everybody knows what it means to be identified as black in America. But it also, when you look at the caste system in India, when you look at the islands where they say, what's that term they used to have? Something the race, lighten the race, or something like that they used to have, or preserve the race, or something like that, where the idea is the lighter your children get, the better off you will be. And that's Tom.
But I do see this is such a good point, because this point about TV, Tamika, I like that point, because I definitely noticed that. Like, so when we were talking about even people who are, what she said was, what I see is that on TV, the mixed or mulatto look is the new black, and that people it's kind of following a trend. Right. And I definitely see that. Right. And I think what it is, it's a way to be socially acceptable as black. Right. So like, that's what we were saying about who is on TV. Right now, you think about who's on TV as like a prime time TV show that your children might be watching, or that's definitely a staple in the culture. It doesn't tend to be a dark-skinned woman. So now some darker-skinned men, I think when it comes to like we saw an episode of, even though we're late, of Queen Sugar, and we said, wow, this person is dark skinned, this person is beautiful. I'm forgetting the actress's name, but the, what's his name? Kofi? I forget his last name. But tons of women are saying he's gorgeous, he's beautiful. And like Masha was saying, that's acceptable to say, because you want to say that you're into blackness. And he is gorgeous. I think he's a gorgeous man. Right. But when it comes to what woman is really on TV, a lot of times it is the woman who is, fair skinned, or who has curly, longer hair, because that's more acceptable. And what happens is people assume, like sometimes people assume about me, that you have a white parent. Right. So it's easier to take, like that you're on the screen, or that you're giving advice in some, type of authority position. Uh-oh.
We went the other way.
I don't know how to fix it.
We lost y'all. We turned the camera around.
Beats me.
Here we go.
Yay!
We back. Well, let me just say this. Because I used to love, what's her name? I used to love, what's her name? Ross. Tracy Ellis Ross on Girlfriends. I don't particularly like her on Blackish. I used to love the way she looked. She was one of my favorite black actresses out there. Something about the energy that I see on Blackish, she doesn't captivate me at all. And it's not just the being the mother energy versus being a single woman,
That's
because I loved Felicia Rashad and different people who played the mother. I actually stopped watching Fresh Prince when the original Aunt Viv left, because I loved her. But the other one, it wasn't personal, but I just wasn't feeling her. So I have, in the celebrity world, as a young adult, I have crushed on very, very dark skinned people and very, very light skinned people, and openly. But what I found is that a lot of times when people have, when I would say that I'm really crushing on somebody really, really dark or somebody really, really light, the person that I'm talking to would oftentimes talk about how I'm dark. And so it's either you're looking for the light-skinned woman or you just like her because she's black. So I think that is really, really interesting, because there is, like I said earlier, there is a projection a lot of times about our experience as dark skin or light skin that we put onto other people. And the reality is some people just don't have your experience, even though they might be the same shade or even though they might be a different shade. But when it plays,
sometimes you do have the experience.
Yeah, sometimes you have the same experience.
Because I remember watching like Dark Girls and
what's that?
When the darker skinned women just talked about it was a documentary where women talked about being dark skinned.
Okay.
And then, I think they did a complimentary documentary about black women who were then lighter skinned. But the idea of an internal conflict within blackness,
right,
where you're saying because you are light skinned, you can't possibly have experienced this.
Right.
Or because you're dark skinned, you don't understand this.
Right.
So there are some things that you don't understand. Like, I don't know what it's like to be a dark skinned woman and to have heard certain things, but I do know what it's like to be a woman and have heard the things that I would get as a light skinned woman. So even as a girl, like we talked about, I had men say red bone, high yellow, like as an address, as though that was supposed to be attractive, So like I've been,
red bone.
That's old, which I used to be like, I don't get it. But it took me a while to be an adult to actually get what was happening.
Right.
But I knew that it was not a good thing, So again, it wasn't even a dear, a sweetie, a sweetheart. It wasn't even that. So I felt some type of way about hearing it, even though I didn't know where it was really coming from as a preteen. So I think that it is interesting when you are saying, there are some things that you just don't know, but that's everyone who has lived an individual life. I don't know what it's like to have lived your life, but there are other things that I think we're distracted by an internal, battle with each other instead of the overall conversation of racism or the true definition of racism.
Problem is the overarching system, but the whole function of the system that Frances Cress talks about, we talked about her book, and Neely Fuller, is that racism has it has four stages. So it's establishment or setting it up, and then it's growth, expanding it, and then it's maintenance, keeping it up. But the one that I always really look to is refinement. The refinement is the disguise of it, the way that we do it now, that makes it seem like it is something other than what it is. And I know someone talked about earlier the mixed person, or this social term that has no basis in reality called biraciality. Stop repeating that word, because you can be a black person with a white parent, but because of the genetic the genetic identity of blackness, you are not somehow biracial. You could look at Nawasha and say she might have a white parent, which is not true. You might look at a person like Barack and say he doesn't have a white parent, which is not true. So you can't really look at us all the time and tell that. But at the same time, you can love your white mother, father, whomever it is, and still be a black person. Most of the white people that I know that have black children, they have a different understanding because they've raised black children, and they are not somehow always saying that this is a biracial child. They say my child is black, and I love him or her for being black. But we see now in this new generation, whatever pop culture calls this generation, whatever white people, we say terms like pop culture, whatever white people call this generation now that they are controlling, they are infusing. And Frances Cress Welsing said that you will see right before she made her transition last year, she was saying you will begin to see in the commercials black men with white women. And why that is important, because if we can condition into the psyche of the child that, nobody doesn't really love their mom unless you've had some traumatic experience. Everybody has an undying love for their mom. So if we can program a generation that says we're going to have adoration for our white mother, which becomes adoration for skin whiteness, while we're black or we have a black father, then we can kind of hold on. There was a time when black people, and we're still in that time, where black people who don't understand the cycles of time are trying their damnedest to hang on or to be included with whiteness. But at the same time, white people understand something genetically that is happening to them, being at minus birth rate and all the other things, the nature that they're challenging. So they are looking to extend themselves, and a part of extending themselves is this false identity of biraciality. It doesn't really exist scientifically. It doesn't really exist genetically, but it exists socially. So biracial is, I am black, but I want to include my white parent into my identity. So I'm just going to say that I am something that doesn't really exist. Now, when you get a bunch of people to agree with it, then it becomes real, but it's not actually true. And that's phenomenology.
That is a really great point, because it comes back to what is blackness. Right. Just true blackness in the universe. So what is universal blackness? So what I see sometimes is when people when someone knows that you have a white parent, someone questions your blackness. And that's happening socially. But I've seen it with the Kaepernick memes. And again, that's not everybody, because he has a big afro. He's talking about drawing attention to something that happens to black men. So he said his friends or his family members. But a lot of times I see people say, well, you're not even really black. Like sometimes when someone knows something about you, when they think they know something about you. So I see it when even if it is somebody like Barack Obama, like you want to make a statement about whiteness, but only because you know something. If you just saw that person, you would just say they're black. And we all know that there are 50 shades of blackness.
Well, they say 111 or 116 shades. Who's out there? Somebody out there who knows that number. I'm sure one of my friends out there, I see Musai, if out there, any insight on that. But I know it's like 111, 113 or 116 that they say are black. But I want to talk about what the ancients say is black and not black, but I'll let you finish that point. So,
that was the point.
Oh, okay. So,
is that why are you, I understand, like what Mansho just said, about you are questioning, you're questioning someone's allegiance to again, like political idea or a spiritual idea. But then the social idea is something different. So truly, when we're talking about an original or indigenous concept of blackness, you're talking about all things. So you're not separating spiritual from political or social. You're saying that this is what we are, and because of that, this is how we create, how we interact with the earth, with each other, with the universe again. You know, like this is what we're kind of picking and choosing what conversation we want to have. So if it's aesthetics, we're saying, okay, this is okay. I like this. I think this is exotic. You know, I think that this is somehow different, and that's what I want to lay claim to. But then when we want to question someone's politics, we say, hey, well, you know, they have a white mom or they have a white dad. And that somehow, I see a lot of times people say, you're not a real black woman or you're not a real black man.
Right. I definitely see that. I see it a lot of times directed at the women. I don't personally see it directed at you, but women who look like you know, our good friend Zaza and many others who happens to have a white parent, you know, and many others that I know that are out there that get that kind of flack. And, you know, a lot of times when I see it, I decode it, you know, because your intelligence is your ability to decode your reality and use it to your benefit, as Francis Cress also taught us. I decode it as misogyny that is, you know, shielded or disguised as race relevancy. Because when I look historically at the culturally conscious collective of black men who I hear saying that kind of stuff, you know, we've had many great men that have come amongst us, like the Malcolms, like the Huey P. Newtons, like the Minister Farrakhan's, and like the seventh Mahdi that came to us and was really teaching us about blackness and whiteness, who had a black and white parent in Master Farrar Muhammad. So when we see that, you know, I don't always hear that kind of angst toward them, but I do hear it, you know, maybe I just notice it more to women. And I think that it's a kind of disguised misogyny. You'll do anything to diss on a sister. So definitely her complexion, because even though those lighter women get that, those dark-skinned women get that as well from them same types. You know what I mean? And I know growing up for me and some of the dark-skinned people that I knew, you know, like when we going back and forth, or if I'm beating you in a game, or we going back and forth with the dozens we cracking and shit, the final thing is you black. You know what I mean? Like that's the, you know, with your black ass, you know, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I think those are the spectrum. So that the medium is a happy brown in the middle. Right. But if you are light skinned, then it's a question of, and I think that's, you know, sometimes people, if they know me, they know that both of my parents are black, you know, so my mom calls herself black. My dad definitely called himself black and looked darker than me. Right. So there was not a question, but depending on where I have traveled to and where I have gone, and when I had I had my father's last name, people asked me, what are you? And people asked me, they assumed that my father must be one of the white-skinned Puerto Rican. So if I said, oh, my mom, you know, her grandparents were from Costa Rica, my dad's from Puerto Rico, people naturally, they put, if you're in New York, then you put a certain spin on that. When I went to school in Miami, people assumed maybe somebody was Cuban, or so it depends regionally on where you are. I'm also tall, so people didn't assume that I was Costa Rican or Mexican, even though I was, because that's a stereotype that you'd be more petite. But I do think it's interesting because then there's you're not black. So you can't insert yourself into a conversation about blackness if you're not black enough. So the criteria is either you can be too black and that ends the conversation, or you're not black enough to even be in the conversation. So nobody wants to hear what you have to say. You don't have anything to contribute because you don't really know a black experience. So I see that with women to other women is let's not go with the ambiguous. We want something that's like really, really black. And like we said,
Right.
there is no one phenotype for blackness. But you're saying, I don't like that this person married a light-skinned woman.
Right.
I don't like that this person, looks this way or talks this way.
When we look at the videos and all of the popular imagery that we've seen is definitely a slant and a lean to light-skinned women. It's just
But
no
the real
way
fight is in racism.
around that. Yeah. No, the real fight is in racism, but I am an advocate of, I don't want to see all them light-skinned people either. And I'm married to a light-skinned person. I don't want to see that shit all the time.
Questioning someone's marriage when you're not in it because of the way that a person's skin tone is over the top. So you choosing what videos you're going to support and you questioning why there isn't a person on primetime television or in the movies that you're paying to watch, those are the things that are influencing your children, who they're going to choose, who they're going to think that's going to become the standard of beauty. So now you have the choice of what to support. But I just see a kind of like the public diss, which we all think we can do to anyone who has a certain amount of celebrity. We feel entitled to make comments about their life. But I just think it's interesting when we're talking about blackness. So there is a true blackness.
Right.
And then there is the social perception of blackness. Like we said, whether it's just coming from entertainment and music and what is, good right now to talk about versus what is spiritually aligned with a black thought and emotion process and what is black consciousness. That's different. Most people are not talking about that. Most people are talking about the superficial.
We're talking about the surface level, right. And it is the surface level that is doing deep damage psychologically. So we need to talk about it. We definitely need to talk about it, and we definitely need to realign it. Our imagery, one of the reasons why we're so big on self-reflection at our house, and we really monitor what comes in, the toys and all that. I think that, when we see the girls go to school and I see a school that is like literally 98% black and all the little girls or boys have like white superheroes or white girls on their lunch boxes or their book bags and stuff like that. When I see that kind of psychological damage, I recognize you don't see that with any other people other than black people, where someone else is the image or the standard of happiness, fun, beauty, except even God. Because if we're going to deal with, I see black people will say, and I'm specifically talking about Christianity, but I will include Islam as well. Never, ever, ever before have I heard two more asinine things like black people will say in this day and time, they will submit to the fact that Jesus may not have been white, but they will rarely show you him as black. And then on the other side, I'm going to say Arab Islam. I'm not going to say the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and how those teachings splintered off into a lot of different things. But I will say, this preoccupation that we don't deal with the imagery of Prophet Muhammad is insane. It is just as it lends to the mystery God type of teaching. And it is just as insidious as, it's not more insidious though, as seeing a white man. And we know that the descriptions, even in the books that we have, is telling you about a person who is not white. But at most, you get some people who will take that image down, but they won't put up another one. So it's still the acceptance of white is right, or if you can show and prove, that whiteness is not the reflection of this thing, then I'll just take that. Then the conversation is over about what a person looks like. And that's absurd in both of those religions. And I know in Judaism we see it too, but it's also in Buddhism when you talk about, So I just think that, this is real. in our families, you know, if we go all the way back to the original Red Bones when that term first came about, this psychotic obsession with black people saying that they have Native Americans in their family. And when they're saying that, they're not talking about the black Native Americans. They're talking about people who look red or who were considered red people, who are nothing but black people who were mixed with some yellow people. So we're talking about, you know, identifying with or placing a higher value on anything that is non-black. And the way it plays out in our families, but also our intimate relationships. Again, I never heard, you know, nobody ever came up to me and said anything as much as they have that I've been in this relationship about kind of like including like we on some team because I got the light skinned girl that some other men are coveting. And my mom is not light skinned. My sister is the lightest person in our family. She's brown, but she is not light skinned. So I grew up really loving the image of brown and black women. And I think that always
speaks again to the difference between men and women, you know, so like a lot of times, again, when we're talking about other people's relationships or who we see that we're modeling, like this comment again from Tamika about celebrities or athletes, like when you see their first wife versus when you see their second wife, there is a change many times. So like the person that you
excellent comment.
Socially, you met a person socially. So like in your what was your social circle?
Only the light skinned women hang out with the people with money. That's what the that's what the message seems to be.
When it is time to have another set of children or to have your children, then it becomes like, again, you're going for the
Eddie Murphy,
exotic
Michael
look.
Jordan. They went all the way. Jamie Foxx now has been with Tom Cruise's ex-wife for like 4 or 5 years. We're finding out. I mean, it's absurd. It's disgusting. Like I love them, but I hate that. And you know, but yeah, we definitely saw it. You know, now when I was growing up, growing up in the 70s and 80s, you know, being over 40, like, you know, there wasn't it was Jane Kennedy. Who else out there? Vanessa Williams, who I loved, you know, when she came out. I loved Jane Kennedy too. Rosalind Cash. It was a lot of them. And most of them were always light skinned. And we didn't start seeing dark-skinned women until the late 80s. I don't remember.
Kevin Hart.
I don't remember a person who was dark-skinned on primetime, except for Will Smith's mom on that show. I don't remember another. Somebody help me out there. I didn't watch like Urkel and 227, like whatever that show. I didn't watch that stuff, so I don't know who was the characters on that, but I don't remember a dark-skinned mother in the 80s or 90s on television.
So this is really this is really important. Weezy. No, this is really important because this is why
I'm saying this is how our
if you can't think of one
value system was coming across.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So when it comes to the loving mother nurturing roles, and this is who is beautiful, this is who ends up on the cover of magazines, this is who, especially now, this is who gets endorsements also. So now you're going to see a person that is known for singing or acting spin off into a sponsorship for other things. So now if you're going through the aisle of a store or you're watching a commercial, those become all of the people.
What show was that?
That's the one that you're talking about. You said I didn't watch Urkel and
that's Urkel and them?
That's Family Matters.
I never knew what the name of that show was. That just looked corny to me. I never watched him. But okay.
So to wrap it up.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, what we're talking about here is how does this play out in your intimate relationship? So those of you who are out there who are in an intimate relationship where you are two dark-skinned people, or you are two light-skinned people in an intimate relationship, or you are like Nawash and I, where you are one is dark and one is light. Does is it different if the man is light and the woman is light? Because I remember, I think Wesley Snipes verbalized in one line that scene with Christopher Williams in New Jack City. Never liked you anyway, you pretty mother. That right there was the testimony of a whole generation. There really wasn't a dude in the street culture, in the even the pimp culture, that was respected who was light skinned. You know what I mean? It was always seen or synonymous with femininity. So the lighter you were, one of my favorite lines KRS had on the Edutainment album was, "All I see is the light-skinned puppy trying hard to be Mr. Tuffy, when in fact you're Mr. Softy with the beige contacts on. Yo, you lost me. I ain't with it. Never was, never had. How could your son even call you dad?" That was the Goldie. Yeah, Goldie was one. But that was even the name Goldie comes from that. You know what I'm saying? That was the general consensus of the men on the street, is that the light skinned tough dude is kind of a joke, and if we was in prison, you would be my girlfriend type of thing. That was the general consensus. Yeah, pretty Tony. So, this is playing out for real in our relationships. And I think we need to really deal with it from the standpoint of our children. So we have this false biraciality coming in. We have, we have a trend now. If you could really see it, we're in the Northeast and I see it a lot on the news. A lot of the co-anchor women are dark-skinned women in the news, but she still isn't being lauded as the beautiful sex symbol that she is. So, we got a saying in Puerto Rico, "Where did your grandma come from?" Yeah, I could believe that. You know what I mean? So, it's very, very important that we begin to understand what blackness is, really talk about the cultural ramifications of blackness, but then to really socially really deal with our own conditioning. Where does your conditioning come from? Where does your preferences come from when it comes to skin color? And the people who say that they don't have preferences, just look at your history. If you're of a certain age and you've been with two or more people, what do the majority of them look like? Are they, and you might not even be able to say that, because it's not necessarily who you got. You know what I'm saying? It's who you want. You know what I mean? Sometimes, I happen to be a brother who I have gotten the sisters that I wanted. Thank you very much, black women, and I love you. But I have never really sought after somebody who I felt like I could not get. But I remember hearing brothers saying growing up that they felt like they couldn't be with this sister because they wasn't something enough. And every time I would look at her, she was light skinned, and that used to annoy me. So, so let's chop it up.
So for the people who said that they have a preference, you might just want to think about, where it came from and why you have it, if it does even affect who you actually are dating. And then for the people who are not sure, you can just sit with it and say, if I had to pick right now who was really attractive or who I would go for, what would it be and why? So we're really just talking about uncovering some of the things that have happened to you from watching TV and hearing those derogatory things when you're younger and you're forming your beliefs for the first time. And now just really understanding, blackness. So like even no matter what shade you are, aligning with blackness when it comes to your relationship, because that's really like the culture of black love, the culture of love from a black perspective is different.
Right.
So it's unique, it's different, it's the thing that creates. So when we're talking about a relationship, that's what we all, when we are black, whether we're light black or dark black, that's what we really are aligning with, is a certain perspective in the relationship, a certain code, a certain standard, a certain method, right? For courting, dating, having children, building a legacy, having purpose. Those things are aligned with our blackness.
Right.
So if you really want to take a look at what your system is for having a relationship, for finding a relationship.
Tina Marie was black.
We're saying that, you can definitely reach out to us because we help people create their soulmate strategy based on core values. Right. So really getting at who is your complement. Like we said before, it's not going to necessarily be just complementary looks, although that sometimes does happen. But it really is about who is the complement to who you actually are. So you don't want to just be picking something superficial and have your relationship be superficial. You really want to say, what are the deal breakers, as we say? Keep that in mind. And then what are you really striving for to complement in yourself? Keep that in mind. And then some of the other things that are preferences, even like we said, height, naturalness, those are things that you are actually physically attracted to. But it's just understanding, are you attracted to one thing, or are you really now holding the other thing in a negative light? Right.
And that's important to know. This symbol right here is an Adinkra symbol. It's the Funtu Meriku Dinku Meriku. And what it represents is our unity in our diversity and our unity through our democracy. So it's, if you're familiar with it, you know what it is. If not, you will see that it's two alligators or two lizards that share a stomach. So what it shows is that they are connected, but they're unique. And I love that we use that symbol tonight. We got a lot of symbols around our house, but we use that symbol tonight to represent this conversation, because it's very important that we understand from the ancient dynamic that, blackness is something spiritual. It is the creative gene that is implanted in us at conception. It's different than melanin. If you look to the ancients and what they teach, we really study the Dogon, Dengara, and the Botswana as the two tribes who never were enslaved. And so their information is very different than even a lot of stuff that you will see or hear on the African continent, because they have never been enslaved. And so their information is very different. It's very pure. It's very, it's what I have the affinity to. And I love all the rest of the tribes and all the other stuff that exists there. But I'm just saying the distinction of them. And so the Dogon are very popular because of their cosmological science is definitely unparalleled in the universe or on this planet. But the Botswana are not as well known, but I don't think, but their information is parallel. And so what they talk about that actually makes you black is not your melanin. It is that God is separating and implanting into children, but the creative germ of the 7 substances that create all things in the universe are magnetism, electricity, ether, light, solid, liquid, and gas. And it is ether, which is the middle of those 7 elements, that makes all physical manifestation possible. So it's that, ether, not the Nas song ether, but the actual triple stage ether of darkness that has all other colors in it and all creative energy coming out of it. They say that once the Ark of the Covenant that you hear about in scriptures is that creative germ. So it is the Ark, or the throne upon which God really manifests into reality. And so the covenant is that once it's implanted, it will continue on, because it takes 7 generations to remove. And I think we see this in European domination, when they used to say that 1/8 or 1 drop of black blood makes you black. So we're taught
plans for breeding out blackness for 7 generations.
They said that you have to breed it out for 7 generations.
In
so
Brazil,
they understand in Australia, in Brazil, they understand
plans
this.
for you. Yeah. This is why people were kidnapped. So even
Right.
Native Americans or indigenous people here, this is why people were really put into boarding schools
Right.
to be controlled
Right.
with who are you going to date next.
Right.
So it was an understanding that I can get blackness out of you in
Right.
7 generations.
7 generations.
If you just dated, if you married once or twice,
It's back.
your children could still be black.
Right.
Even if they dated and married once or twice, they could still have black children.
Right.
So again, it's not the idea of what you look like, because we all
Biological
know
alchemy,
some
that's
of
right. Mary.
the books that we highlight, like Forbidden Fruit.
Right.
There are stories where people are so-called passing, right? So you're saying I'm black, but I'm maybe white passing socially again. So I know that I'm black. I know that I could have black children. I'm very aware of who I am, but in a social setting, I might choose to say that I'm white because it's to my benefit. So I believe. And at different times in history, I would say over the last couple thousand years, we have seen people that we know, if we've researched them, that they are black in those 7 generations, but they have aligned with whiteness, thinking that that is the future, that's where the culture is going. So I'm going to make a choice to align in that way for the benefit of, my legacy or
We saw
my
that
safety.
in Kemet. We saw that in, and let me just say, Tamika talked about Thanks for the True Tribes. If you've never read this book, you should get this book. This is the only book that I know of coming out of Black Root Science that's coming out of an elder of the Botswana tradition. Nawasha has a lot of stuff from Sombofu Some and Malidoma Some, who are from the Dangara, they're elders of the Dangara tradition, and Sombofu, who we love, just actually made her transition last year. But I think that this whole conversation of the breeding out and the presence of is really, really important, because like when we look at somebody, to your point, I think the person who has now surpassed Michael Jackson with the bleaching and the whatnot is Sammy Sosa. So I don't know if anybody has seen Sammy Sosa lately, but dude is like on something totally different than what he was. And so it's really an effect, a psychological damage that we have seen from racism, white supremacy, that is making us hate self. And so we have to move away from that.
How is racism affecting your relationship? Sometimes we think it affects it on each one of those levels that we just read from Francis Cress's definition of racism. But truly in your thought processes, in the symbols that are in your home, in the things that you're entertaining, and then if you decide to have children, the things that you are saying and giving to your children, like how is racism affecting your relationship? So colorism is just a byproduct of racism, because you only have this discrimination or affinity towards whiteness because of racism in the first place. So this is the I am, and I know this is not everyone, but this is the I'm going for an exotic child look. So I want my wife to look like this, and I want my husband to look like this. I talk to a lot of young people who say that. I talk to a lot of my students who say, Mr. Macho, I would never marry a man like you. Black Like Me in Reverse. Yeah, the movie and the book Black Like Me in Reverse. That's right. They say I like you as a person, but I would never marry or have a child with a person who looks like you, because it would be harder for them. And so people are not really understanding the cycles of time. Hey, blackness in all its shades is where it's at. Everybody understands that. That's why you're seeing a flood of it in the media, but it's still being socially engineered to what shade is the best. There was even a study what is beautiful
that they were saying that where black men where men in their misogyny were saying that light-skinned women are more beautiful, but black dark-skinned women are the object of so much sexual lust. And so this goes back to the enslavers. During our enslavement, the enslavers would, try to smut out this dark chocolate beautiful princess and, hold this fair-skinned woman to such a high standard, but not, let that true devil out when it came to their sexual conquest. So that's an interesting thing. I read that, and then there's this video that's going around about black women who have had interracial relationships, and they would talk about the things that their partners were saying to them during the sex act about their blackness. So it's very interesting. You can look that up. I actually seen some of that on Facebook. So like a few weeks ago, I actually saw it. So we've been talking about this for the last couple of months. And interestingly, I have to say, in our relationship, I think we can honestly say it really hasn't been an issue for us, just where we are culturally, thanks to our initiation, and just where we are grounded politically. I love Noasha. I love her lightness and her because it's her and not because it's light. When I have loved a dark-skinned woman, I have loved her because of her and not because she was dark. I did in my late teens go through a phase where I was trying to only date people who were dark because I was rebelling against something that I hated in the promotion. But, I've been off of that probably for 20 years and, being in this relationship for 17 years. And, I've been off of it the whole time I've been with you. So, so I got off of it right when I got with you. But
so we want you to give us a call or, of course, send us a message or go to bit.ly/soulmate strategy session to talk to us, schedule a time to just chat with us, because we really would like people to benefit from the initiation that we have and just the understanding of what is blackness and what is it that you are really making a decision to have on your criteria list for who you are dating. So we want to drop some of the superficial things and make sure that we're doing the best for ourselves, getting a true soulmate that is the complement to your actual personality, and that you're respecting who the other person is and respecting who your children are. So anywhere in those 7 generations, you have a darker skinned child or a lighter skinned child, we want you to say the best things to those children so that they say the best things to each other and they don't have to suffer with some of the things that we heard, that we had, that those derogatory statements that helped us form the so-called preferences that we have. Right. So if you think you have a preference, it's just about you investigating where it really comes from. Right. Is it social conditioning, or is it just that you have an affinity towards your first love and that happens to be how that person looks? The idea is for us to really, like we said, shift to choosing someone based on character and your own character development, instead of getting caught up in, this kind of visual world that we're in right now. Right. And just looking to create.
Don't get rid of the visual world. Man.
No, don't get rid of it. But we have to make sure that we put, the mixed kids blogs and all of those types of things have to go into context, because I see what is understood by adults, is different. Like we said, when we were younger, than what is understood by children. So just like we said, the cartoons that affected us and really gave us our first taste of racism and the preference towards whiteness when it comes to beauty and it comes to goodness in the world. We want to make sure that we're not also doing that now. So in a social media world where young children are looking at who says someone has the cutest babies and who says, someone is the cutest couple. A lot of that is now, it might not be what most people think, but what gets to proliferate is this look is beautiful. This look is exotic. And those types of terms only are relative. They're subjective. Right. So if you're here in the United States where there are tons of different kinds of people, what is exotic? It really just means something that is different or so-called non-native or foreign or something like that. If you're someplace else, something else is going to be considered exotic. So I think that we just have to take a look at what we're promoting, what we're saying, especially when it comes to men and to women. who are our superstars that we allow.
Get that white man off your mental plane.
But really take a look at how you can purge racism from your relationship.
Brothers.
So, and this is in the courting and the dating typically, but also when you're having your children. So we really want you to contact us. That's bit.ly/soulmate strategy session to talk to us about really having a strategy for finding your soulmate or keeping your soulmate or building a legacy with your soulmate.
Right. I want all the brothers out there. I don't watch television, so tell me who's dope. What sisters that are out there, dark skin and light skin. I want to hear both. I know Tracy Ellis Ross is out there because I've seen the Washer watching Blackish, and I used to love Tracy Ellis Ross, but I don't like her on this show. I don't something about I just I still think she's beautiful, but I just don't like her. But who is out there that's banging? I want to know, because I'm not really following at all. I don't get time to watch TV, and I don't like TV, so I don't really watch it. But so I would like to know that. I'm still big on Phyllis Yvonne Stickney, and I used to love Eddie Murphy's ex-wife. What's her name? Nicole Murphy. I just thought she was just so naturally beautiful. Somebody told me she had plastic surgery, though. I don't know about that, but I thought she's just beautiful. So anyway, from the extreme to the light to the dark, we all have value. We all are, holding our space and have manifested here for a divine purpose. So let's manifest that purpose in our intimate relationships. Let us come together on the basis of, let's build on the basis of substance, even if we came together off of a preference. If you honestly don't have a preference, I don't know how that's possible, but if you honestly don't have a preference, you don't. But if you honestly do, accept that somebody might have the opposite preference, and that's okay, as long as we're still living by a moral, ethical law that will allow us to nation build. And so, that's it. That's what we had to offer. We've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time because it has not been personally relevant for us, but it has been relevant in what people have said to us or said to me. She said they don't say nothing to her.
No, I don't. No one has ever said anything to me about my color or Monshow's color in our relationship as we move around. But as a woman, I have seen the things that are about children or about your husband. Even now, like I saw a lot of, this is not colorism, but I saw a lot of things about Serena Williams getting married and what her daughter looks like compared to her and her sister. So there's like a conversation about what is a beautiful child. And we're still having the same conversation that we've been having about aligning more towards whiteness in order to be beautiful. So I think like it comes up in a conversation often in just the social conversation. So this is our group think and our group conversation, not personally for me and not in my relationship. But I definitely I follow a little bit of what, comes out in our social world, like so with social media, those kinds of conversations. And again, I know that that's not everyone out of the 7 billion people on the planet, or the 1.8 billion black people on the planet. I know that that's not the sum of our conversation, but it is interesting what gets to proliferate and what is popular on what we're calling social media. So when we're saying what is the social blackness versus the spiritual blackness, or political blackness or cultural blackness, I think it's relevant. And I find that we are having this conversation a lot as black people. Like, what does it really mean to be black? Who is black? And who is not black enough? So like, I think we're having that conversation. So it's interesting. I think it's good to take a look at where your ideas about relationships come from.
Right.
So that's it.
Get this book. The psychotech.
Before we go into,
we show a lot of books. Get this book, The Psychotechnology of Brainwashing by Chief Kwabena Asante. Is that his name? Yes. Dope book. And in that book, this is unrelated, but I got to say this. In that book, I know about 2-3 months ago, it was a lot of conversation about the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and the gender bending and gender fluidity. In that book, Chief Asante breaks down how the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts concept is stolen from Baden Powell from the Zulu and the Ashanti. Really, really detailed information from the symbols to all of the stuff that they use, the handshake, all of that. It's really, really deep detail about who exactly gave them the information and how they stole it and then how they document it. And then Baden Powell created the Boy Scouts, and then he wrote a letter to his sister and she created the Girl Scouts. So it's the classic theft, but it really talks about the reprogramming of your mind. So colorism, reprogram your mind. Black is black. Somebody says she thought she never was. That might be true. That might be true, Tamika. I love Serena Williams, but the marriage and all that, I'm not feeling it. Like, I just can't even, I believe in unconditional love. I believe that we should support these celebrities and these personalities that we love, but we should have the courage to call them out when they're wrong. I don't really advocate those interracial relationships. And to me, when she did that, it just, in the celebration of it, just became disgusting to me. So I just stopped even, what I'm saying? So, but that's a whole nother conversation. So, anyway, the interracial concept is real. I mean, the colorism thing is real, and it is a byproduct of racism, white supremacy. We want you to reach out to us if you want to go deeper with the substantive relationship building, legacy building, love building. And as always, we greet you in peace. And we say, Nia Akoma.
Nia Akoma.
Hotep.